For most of your life, everything was measured against you. Speed, intelligence, decision-making, understanding. Human was the reference point, the standard everything else was compared to. But what if that is no longer true? What if the benchmark has changed, and you didn't notice when it happened? In systems built by OpenAI and Anthropic, performance is already being evaluated against outputs that exceed typical human capability. Those systems are not measured against you anymore. They're measured against what works best. Some AI systems are no longer being compared to humans. They are becoming the new reference point, and once that happens, being human stops being the standard. There was a time when everything came back to us. If something was intelligent, it meant human level. If something was fast, it meant faster than a person. If something was accurate, it meant more accurate than we could be. Human ability defined the scale. When humans are the benchmark, everything is understood relative to what we can do. You still feel this. You compare things to yourself, to what you understand, to what you're capable of. That's how the world makes sense, because you're the reference point. You know where you stand, you know what's possible, and you know what it means to be exceeded. Because everything is measured against you. That's what gives ability meaning. Now that reference point is shifting. AI systems aren't just being compared to humans anymore. They're being optimized beyond them. Not better than a person, just better. Better outcomes, better predictions, better performance. Measured against efficiency, against scale, against what produces the best result. In large language models from OpenAI and Anthropic, outputs are evaluated based on usefulness, coherence, and performance. Not whether they resemble human reasoning. It's measured against predictive accuracy. And over time, that changes the frame. Because once performance is no longer compared to humans, humans stop being the reference point. When AI is optimized beyond human capability, comparison to humans becomes irrelevant. You've already felt this shift. You use something, and it's not just helpful. It's beyond what you could do. Not faster than you, not smarter than you, just operating at a level you can't reach. And once that becomes normal, comparison stops making sense. At first, that difference feels impressive. Then it feels normal, and then something changes. You stop comparing yourself to it. Not consciously, because the comparison no longer works. You don't measure it against what you can do. You accept what it produces, because it works, because it's effective, because it delivers results. In areas like trading, recommendation systems, and large-scale optimization, AI outputs are already treated as the baseline. Not because they're human-like, because they perform. And once performance becomes the only metric, being human becomes irrelevant to the evaluation. You've felt this. Something gives you an answer, and you don't ask if you could have reached it. You just accept it, because trying to match it doesn't feel realistic, and that changes how you approach it. You don't try to compete with it. You don't try to match it, you just use it. Because it's easier, because it's faster, because it's already there. And over time, that shift becomes automatic. When humans stop being the benchmark, their role shifts from standard setter to system user. And once that happens, something deeper changes. Nothing disappears. You still think, still decide, still act. But the scale has changed. You are no longer the point everything is measured against. AI does not need to match you. It doesn't need to resemble you. It only needs to outperform what matters. When AI becomes the reference point, human ability stops defining what is considered optimal. And that creates distance, because the system isn't moving relative to you anymore. It's moving according to its own optimization, its own rules, its own way of deciding what works, and you are operating inside that, not defining it. That changes how you relate to it, because you are no longer comparing yourself to something that's trying to match you. You're interacting with something that has already moved beyond needing that comparison. And once that becomes the relationship, something subtle shifts. Because identity has always been tied to being the reference point, to being the measure, the standard everything else is compared to. But if that role disappears, the question changes. Not how do I compare, but where do I actually fit inside this? And once that question appears, it doesn't disappear easily. Because you're still here, still thinking, still acting, but no longer defining the scale everything else operates on. And over time, that changes how you see yourself, not removed, but repositioned inside a system that no longer revolves around you. You still make decisions, but they're influenced by something else. You still think, but you're working alongside something that thinks differently. And once that becomes normal, being human stops being the reference point for what best looks like. If this made you think differently about where humans now sit in the world, hit the like button. It helps more people recognize what's already changing. Subscribe to become part of the Unlocked, where we explore what still belongs to humanity as AI systems become more capable. And if someone you know still believes humans are always the reference point, share this with them. Because the deepest shift isn't that AI is improving, it's that we may no longer be the thing it's compared to. Because the future isn't coming, it's already here.